Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the excellent, great, phenomenal, spectacular sequel, Evil Dead 2, Dead by Dawn. I absolutely love this film. I think it is one of the best sequels ever. And I feel that it's one of the best horror comedies out there. It really does create the perfect balance of horror and comedy. There's some really laugh out loud, hilarious moments in it because of the physical comedy by Bruce Campbell, or certain other moments in the movie, like the eyeball in the mouth gag and all this other stuff. Is the unexpected bits, and on top of that, it's also genuinely scary at times, like because of its intensity and because of just how fucked up and crazy things are. It's like an absolute manic nightmare of epic proportions. It really is. So Sam Raimi returns to the director's chair with this film, and he also helped write it along with Scott Spiegel. And it really does help that you have another voice in the writer's room, and instead of just Sam trying to go back and doing everything all over again on him, on his own by himself. It really is something that makes this sequel not necessarily rise above the first, but definitely feel fresh and innovative and feel like it's its own different kind of film and animal. Because in a lot of ways, Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2 are two completely different beasts. The first film is more of a straight up traditional horror movie. This one is more of a horror comedy. And I think that was the right approach to make. Instead of just doing a serious horror take on this plot all over again with some different makeup effects, a little bit higher of a budget, I don't really think that would have worked. I think that would have been ineffective, inefficient, and I don't think it really would have gotten that much acclaim from critics or audiences. So taking a different approach with this sequel was actually the right choice to make. This sequel, though, took forever to get into any kind of production because the first film, while it garnered a cult following, it didn't really make a ton of money. So no studio was really like, yeah, Evil Dead, we really need to do more Evil Dead. So it took somebody to legitimately go out on a limb and put faith into this project for it to even get made. And there was even a stipulation. I think it was. I'm trying to remember if it was. It was definitely Dino De Laurentiis. Was one of the offshoots, or maybe it was Dino himself, but it was one of the studios that he was working on. And there was a distribution thing, and there was a whole thing with, I think, also somewhat to do with the budget, where in order for this to actually get made and to shoot in front of a camera, they had to essentially remake the first movie. And right off the bat, that's a huge handicap for a sequel. Like, hey, you can't do something completely different and 100% original when it comes to the plot line. You have to do the same thing, but at the same time try to make it different enough. It's very difficult. And in this instance, a lot of sequels don't really pull that off, because a lot of successful sequels wind up doing something completely, not necessarily off the rails, but completely different than what the predecessor, what the previous film was doing. And this instead is a very similar plot line to the first film, and that's intentional. They had to do that. But despite that, they make it still feel different enough because of the tone and because of the approach that they take with this adaptation of the previous story that was featured in The Evil Dead. You bring back Ash. He is the main focal point here, and you have some different supporting characters and actors. You don't really have the other people that were hanging out with Ash in the cabin. They just change it to being just Ash and Linda. It was on their honeymoon or something like that. And then they put in some other characters like Jake and Bobby Joe and Richard Domeier and John Peaks. So you have these different characters that are brought into the fold that are different than the characters, the supporting cast at least, from the first film. And that helps this one stand out a little bit more from the first as well. Because it's not just, oh, it's the same characters, but they're played by different actors. So they don't really take that approach, which is nice. And even as the plot goes along, it doesn't really follow the exact precise beats as the first film either. But there is a lot of deja vu in the beginning with Ash and Linda and him having to dismember her and all of this. But they do things differently though, like the stuff with Linda and her body when it comes to life and is doing the dance of the chainsaw. And so, despite the fact that it's kind of the same story in the beginning, they tweak things enough where it feels like it's a new interpretation of it. It's similar, but at the same time, it's not complete and total Xerox. Like it's not just copying the plot or this particular part of the plot beat for beat. And once it gets into the meat of the new plot line, it really becomes something that is every bit as good as the first film, but in a new and fresh way. I love so many scenes in this movie. The sequence with Ash, and he's sitting there in the chair and he's completely losing his mind, and in the process the cabin itself is losing its mind. Everything's going to hell in a handbasket. The fucking lamp is laughing at him. The moose head is giggling. It's just this crazy fucking shit. And then you have stuff like when his hand gets possessed and he cuts it off with the chainsaw, and his severed hand is running around like some demented, really angry and jilted version of the Thing, a Thing from Addams Family. It's like flipping Ash off, like, and hiding around in mouse holes like it's a Tom and Jerry cartoon, and he's shooting at it with a shotgun. It's really a lot of fun. It's really fun stuff, and you have a different Deadite in the cellar, and I think it might have been Henrietta. And you have that gag that it just always gets me when stomps on the Deadite's head and the eyeball pops out and flies into this woman's mouth. And it's funny because it's so unexpected, and it's got, the eye pops out with like a cartoon sound effect, and it's just a really nice bit of physical comedy. And, the one-liners, like Ash is a straight up badass in this. I mean, with the shotgun and the chainsaw and, the famous one-liner, groovy. It really is a film that is quite a crowd pleaser in numerous different ways. And a lot of it does come down to the script by Sam Raimi and Scott Spiegel. And speaking of crowd-pleasing stuff, Sam Raimi returns with the same just chaotic energy that he somehow manages to control and just weaponize into just absolute brilliance from a directorial standpoint, from the camera angles to the zooms to the pans to all of those different things. And the effects in this are impressive. They are outstanding. Like this film features some of the best practical effects and gore from this particular decade. So many well-established and really talented technicians lending their talents to this particular film, and it pays off in just such glorious fashion. And once again, really maintains the same quick breakneck pace from the first film. That's something that should have been copied. These films are frenetic. These films are just absolute, manic, just insanity. And it makes sense for the pace to reflect that. And I thought the supporting characters, the way they're written, they're decent enough. I will say this about this film. The supporting cast is not really the strongest. And I actually like the supporting cast more in the first film. But that's just me personally. Dan Hicks was alright as Jake. Kassie Wesley as Bobby Joe. But I mean, or Sarah Berry. I think I would probably say I like Sarah Berry probably the most. But really, it's Bruce Campbell's film. It's Ash's movie. So I get it. Ash is front and center, and he is the main focal point of this particular version of the story, and that's to the film's benefit. But I can't sit here and say the supporting cast is something that I thought was incredibly strong. I in particular, I kind of didn't really care for the Bobby Joe character, but that's just me personally. And they do borrow some other elements from the first film in terms of some of the stuff with Linda, but I like how they, switch things around where, you have the bit of jewelry that Ash has that reminds him of the love that, he shared with Linda, and he uses that to snap out of being possessed by a deadite. So I thought it was a moment the film had where it had that little bit of heart, but it doesn't have as much of that because in the end of the day, that's not really kind of film that this is trying to be. So it doesn't really have as much of that kind of stuff either, which is fine. The score by Joseph DeLuca, or Loduca. I probably fucked up his name in the last video. I feel bad. But I think there's a guy named Joseph DeLuca and somewhere else, but Loduca, it's still a good score. I would say I actually like the score a little bit more than the score for the first film, because I think there's a little bit more beats and a little bit more moments and notes in it that really resonated with me a bit more than the score for the first movie. The first movie is just a lot of atmosphere, and it's very effective atmosphere, but this score had a little bit more to it to me personally. The cinematography by Peter Deming, fantastic, dynamic as all hell, really good stuff. Well edited by Kay Davis, and they had more of a budget to work with, $3.5 million, and boy, is every bit of it on the screen. I mean, the finale with the giant, deadite head and tree and all this other stuff, and the portal, and just really, really well executed stuff when it comes to the effects and even the visual effects. Some really impressive visual effects. Really good marketing too. I always loved the poster with the skull, with the eyes. Very simple, but very, very striking in terms of a visual. And this is a good Blu-ray. It's an older release, but it's a really good Blu-ray. The transfer's still really nice, and it's loaded with features. Absolutely filled to the brim with features. Very extensive. Yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I mean, I can say a little bit more about the cast. Bruce Campbell plays a different role here as Ash. The more familiar take on Ash, the one who's, firing his boomstick and spouting one-liners, and being the chin that could kill. And, that's, and in a lot of ways, this is the genesis of that character and of that portrayal, and really the moment when Bruce broke out of his shell and really became a very strong and compelling leading man. And it's a blast to watch. He's a really great physical comedian. The stuff that he does in terms of the physical comedy in this, when he's just beating himself up, are an absolute riot, and really shows you how committed he was to this film and to this character and this portrayal. And you know, it's a believable transition from, the Ash from the first film to this badass, because Bruce just does it so well. I think if he wasn't able to kind of pull it off, and at this point in his career he didn't really break out of his shell, I don't think it would be as effective or as memorable, and it would come across as a little forced. But that isn't the case here. It comes across as incredibly natural, as if this is the kind of role that Bruce was born to play. And the rest of the cast, they do fine. Like I said, I mean, Sarah Berry as Annie, I feel that she has a good amount of chemistry with Bruce in this film. Dan Hicks is fine with the role that he's asked to portray. I'm not really super big on Bobby Joe as a character, but Kassie Wesley's performance isn't really a problem. Denise Bixler as Linda, a little bit role, but good enough. Ted Raimi as possessed Henrietta. I mean, Ted really acted his ass off in that suit. Like that was not an easy thing to do, because that was such a uncomfortable suit and thing to shoot in. Like I have mad props for Ted Raimi, because I think it was like half a day or something. It was a really long time getting into that makeup and dealing with that, and just sweating his ass off, and just, he really did give it his all and brought that character to life and added his own touch to it. And one thing I did want to mention is the production and the art design. I didn't really mention that when I was talking about the first film, and I should have mentioned it a little bit more, because that's another impressive element of the Evil Dead, and that carries over with the sequel, because the production and design and art direction here, especially the design of the Book of the Dead. The Book of the Dead looked fine in the first film, but this is really where the iconic design of the Book of the Dead really comes into play. And it is such a striking visual, the Book of the Dead, and how it's shown and how it's showcased in the film. And yeah, I don't really know what else to say. I know it's another movie that probably had a lot of problems, in terms of the shoot. It's very complicated, very stressful for a lot of people involved. But you couldn't tell, because there was this really big sense of fun and escapism, and just really great feel of enjoyability and lightheartedness, despite this really heavy kind of subject matter, and the intensity of things. This movie is hilarious on more than one occasion. It'll actually make your blood curdle in other times. It's one of those movies that is absolutely worth every amount of praise that it gets, and still continues to get to this day. I can see why it's some of horror fans' best of the best when it comes to horror films or movies in general, because I love it. I love Evil Dead 2. I loved it ever since I first saw it on VHS, and then when I saw it on DVD, when I saw it on Laserdisc, on a blood red Laserdisc, which is one of my favorite Laserdiscs that I own, is the Evil Dead Laserdisc that has a blood red disc. It's a film that absolutely 100% stands the test of time. And like I said, it is a brilliant blend of comedy and horror. It brings the thrills, it brings the chills, it brings the spills. If you want blood and gore, you get that. You get a lot of that. And it's just one of those films that is just so enjoyable and really does represent what it is like to just sit down and just enjoy a movie. You know, it's pure over the top crazy entertainment, but you got to love it because of its creativity, because of its originality, and because of the fact that it knows that it's a fun movie. It knows that this is meant to be a terrific and just demented thrill ride. So, yeah, I got nothing else to say about the movie. I know it's a pretty short review, but it's one of those films that speaks for itself, and I can't really say anything about it that other people haven't really already said about this movie. And I definitely do recommend it if you haven't seen it yet. But I can't really think of that many people who haven't seen Evil Dead 2. But if you're one of those people, definitely give it a watch. If you haven't seen it in a while, check it out again, because it's the perfect time of the year to watch Evil Dead 2. Well, to be honest, any time of the year is a perfect time to watch Evil Dead 2. Because it's such a groovy film. You know, as corny as that sounds, it really does sum up the film, and it really does work with this movie. It really does find a groove. Better than a lot of films of its type do. So anyway, thanks for watching my review of Evil Dead 2. As always, I'll see you later. See ya.